This is episode 33 of the Five Factors podcast. Hi, my name is Matt Adair. I am a pastor, a leadership coach, and organizational consultant, and I'm excited about today's conversation with Mac Lake about the most significant way that you can invest in the leaders in your church. Now, we care about this because within the Five Factors framework, which is a framework for leadership development, we believe that five-factor leaders have the ambition to build Jesus' church, and you can't do that alone. You have to have the right kind of leaders around you. And what we believe is that every good leader is foundationally a follower of Jesus. So I brought on the godfather of leadership development, my friend Mac Lake, to talk about what it looks like for you to disciple the leaders in your church. Mac has more than 35 years of ministry experience as a church planter, a pastor. He helped start the Multiply group in 2011, which the North American Mission Board now uses along with other groups to help assess and train church planters. He loves the local church. He loves pastors. So listen up and dig into my conversation with Mac Lake. Here with Mac Lake. Mac, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, man, I've been looking forward to it. Matt, I love what you're doing with the podcast and privileged to be a part of it.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And I refer to you affectionately as the godfather of leadership development. And that doesn't mean you're old. It just means
yeah, what do you mean by that, Matt?
You've deep dived this thing. I was thinking about this. You know, you have over 35 years of ministry experience. And I was wondering if when you look back over your time in ministry or maybe even growing up, with leadership development being a passion for you, the way it's preaching for other people and other aspects of life and ministry, are there things that you could see in your story where you're like, yeah, this is why I love developing leaders?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, great question. Yeah, Matt, it came because I was saved at 9 years old. And I had parents who were passionate about the church, passionate about the relationship with Christ. So I caught that very early on. And I fell in love with Christ. I fell in love with the church, have been, stayed faithful, never did the teenage wild years and all that. And, but back then I was very shy, and people used to tell me all the way into my early 20s, Mac, you're a nice guy, but you're not a leader. You're a nice guy. And so as I look back at my story, Matt, I'm passionate about a leadership development because of my leadership development journey. I went through what I call 3 conversions. My first conversion was at 9 years old when I went from lost to found. That's when I gave my life to Christ, and I started growing in my faith. And I was passionate about serving in ministry, but again, I was told I wasn't a leader.
Right.
Then at 27 years old, I had a second conversion. There was a pastor when I was at Dallas Seminary who took me under his wing and began to meet with me every Tuesday and said, Mac, I want to talk to you about leadership every Tuesday. He gave me a book, article, CD, something.
Wow.
And every Tuesday, we just talked about leadership. And first time in my life, somebody saw me as a leader. And so that's what I call my second conversion, where I went from doer to leader. And then a few years later, I was in full-time ministry, out of seminary, full-time ministry, passionate about leading. I was leading everything. It was my first church assignment. I was associate pastor in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. I was leading everything, Matt. I was a leadership
the lead
maniac.
pastor was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this, and you're going to do everything else.
He loved me. He loved me. And I was leading everything. And about a year in, I was like, I told my wife, they're going to fire me because I'm leading so many things. Everything is getting ready to come crumbling down. And long story short, God just really wrecked me and showed me at that point, if I didn't do leadership development, I wasn't going to survive ministry because we were in a growing church. And so I surrounded myself with 7 people and said, guys, I'm going to start developing you. I need you to lead your teams. I'm going to stay out of your way. I'm going to develop you. You develop your teams. If your teams come to me, I will not undermine your leadership. I'll support your leadership, point them back to you. So first time in my life, I started doing leadership development. And that was my third conversion, where I went from leader to developer. And that's why I'm passionate about it.
Had there been influences on you? I mean, where did you kind of pick that up? I mean, did you pick it up? Did it just kind of come from the heavens? I mean, in terms of just going leadership development, because there wasn't a lot going on back then in terms of leadership development, right?
There wasn't, no. And this is what I always tell people, that those three conversions I had. Okay, let's look at this, the two conversions from doer to leader, leader to developer. You're going to have that conversion through pain. Oh my goodness gracious, I've got to do something about this. Pressure, external pressure. Hey, you better develop leaders or I'm going to fire you. Or a person, somebody coming alongside you, helping you have that conversion. So my conversion from doer to leader, a person helped me have that. My third conversion came, my leader to developer conversion came through pain. I knew I couldn't survive. The best way to have a conversion is somebody walking alongside. Yeah. And what I always tell pastors, it's so important we understand these three conversions, because a lot of times as senior pastors, we're saying, hey, team, I need you to develop leaders. I need you to develop leaders. Well, some of them have never had that second or third conversion. And it's like it's like asking a lost person to lead somebody to Christ. So we got to make sure the people around us have converted from doer to leader and leader to developer, if they're going to be successful in these efforts. So for me, it came through pain and through my exposure to stumbling upon John Maxwell in 1992.
Yeah. He kind of really was the catalyst for so much of this. I mean, thinking back to when you started ministry, nobody was really talking about leadership development. Now everybody is. So, I mean, I don't want to basically set him off to the side. We can include him in this, but what's changed to where practically every church, every tribe of churches, every group is thinking about and trying to be intentional about developing leaders?
Yeah, Matt, a great question. I really think it goes back to the 90s. You look back at the 90s. In 1990, I remember in 1990, Dr. Howard Hendricks at Dallas Seminary, I took the first course he ever taught on leadership. So he introduced leadership class at seminary. That was like, whoa, revolutionary. 1995, Willow Creek Leadership Summit started. 1995, John Maxwell left Skyline and went full-time in this leadership space. 1998, Google was started. And so now we can research and discover leadership content for the first time. And so I think the pain was there. Churches were growing, and the pain of, we've got to manage this well, we got to lead this well was there. And then in those mid-90s, that's when all of a sudden the resources surfaced, and we got this awareness of the importance of leadership for the first time.
Yeah, and obviously, I think some of the critique on sort of all things leadership within the church is we survived 2,000 years without it, and so for anybody who's possibly skeptical at this point about it, coach them up a little bit here and just going, hey, this isn't brand new. We're just bringing awareness to something that's been around for a long time.
Yeah, my life verse is Psalm 78:72. And Psalm 78:72 says, David shepherded them with pure heart, and he guided them with skillful hands. So what that verse tells me is David was a phenomenal leader, but it tells me why he was a phenomenal leader. He had two things. He had leadership spirit. He shepherded them with a pure heart. So he had love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. I mean, he wasn't perfect. We all know that, but he shepherded them with a pure heart. And when you have leadership spirit, people will follow you because they're like, oh my gosh, I love this guy. I love his spirit. But they're only going to follow you so far, because after a while they're going to go, you know what? I love the guy, but he's not getting us anywhere. He doesn't have any leadership skill. And so that's the other part of the verse. David guided them with skillful hands. So he had leadership skill as well. Now, some guys, they err on the side of leadership skill. They're like, whoa, I'm going to follow this guy because he gets things done. Right. And people will follow you for a while, but then they stop after a while because like, you know what? I'm just a widget in his machine. I'm just being used. I'm not valued. And so we got to have leadership spirit and leadership skill. And then, Matt, when I'm teaching leadership pipeline to different churches, this is the pushback I get a lot of times, is because we start out by talking about structure and system, right? And little spiritual radar, flags start going off in people's mind. Whoa, wait a minute now. But if you think about it, you look back, at certain times in biblical history, you look at Exodus 18, Acts chapter 6, when Paul and Titus saw an evangelistic outbreak on the island of Crete. What was the response to growth? It wasn't, hey, you need to pray more. Nothing wrong with praying, obviously, but it wasn't, hey, you need to pray more. It was, hey, you need to put a structure in place and a system in place. So God's spiritual answer at certain times of growth is structure and system. And we've got to embrace that, and not fight against it, because that's what he provided so many times. And so leadership is essential at motivating and moving people forward towards God, what God wants to build.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's baked into discipleship, right? And for all the conversation that people have about, maybe frustrated with leadership development or just turning around all of a sudden, it's like, does it say something about the state of health in the church that all of a sudden we're so reliant on leadership development? I tend to say the answer is no. I mean, what we're simply doing is taking this aspect of discipleship that it was either happening and wasn't just being recognized for what it is, which is developing leaders, or we just simply forgot it and we're kind of pulling it back into to play because we have an opportunity here. So I don't hear a lot of argument about discipleship, right?
No.
But when we come back into that, helping people see that within leadership development. So here's what I thought we could work on together. You work with a lot of different size churches. You're working with a lot of different networks, a lot of denominations and things like that. So I'm thinking a church of about 200 people, and there's a commitment to discipleship, and they're doing some things in discipling other people. They have an awareness of developing leaders, and they're starting to do some things there. But they feel like there's something missing in terms of with the leaders in their church, and they've got a pipeline that's kind of established. So they've got people overseeing the organization. They're even looking at volunteers and seeing them as leaders. So is there one thing that you're seeing in the churches that you're working with that is kind of a simple next step for that church that they could at least, hey, if you're not doing this already, this is a really simple and sustainable way for you to disciple your leaders and help them follow Jesus?
Yeah. Let me share from a biblical perspective. Then I'm going to tell you a personal story.
I don't think we're going to go wrong by sharing Bible.
Yeah. So, what I would say to a church of 200, what you just described, I would say, hey, let's help our people understand first that let's look at Jesus as a leader developer. Okay. Now, again, that's going to freak some people out, but but he's discipling leaders is what he's doing. When that pastor came alongside my life at age 27, I was already living like Jesus. I was a Christ-centered believer. What he did is he helped me learn to lead like Jesus. And the church is doing a decent job in helping disciple people to live like Jesus. We've got to disciple them to learn to lead like Jesus. And that's what he did with me. And that's why I'm passionate about it. You think about when at Jesus' baptism, there was a handful of what would be his disciples there. And when he was baptized, they came up to him and said, "Who in the world are you?" And he said, "Well, come and see." And they followed him, and they made their way up towards Galilee and Samaria. He cast a little bit of vision, said, "Look at this. I mean, look and see, the fields are ripe unto harvest." And they're like, "Wow, this guy's seeing something we're not seeing." Then they follow him on up to Galilee and build a relationship with him. They're listening to him teach. Obviously, he's doing basic discipleship with them at this point. And he comes alongside and said, "Hey, come follow me." They're not leaders yet. They're disciples. They're just disciples at that level right now. So it's to come and see. Then it was about 9 months, best I can figure out. It was about 9 months later. He said, "Okay, guys, you followed me through Galilee, through the 240 villages of Galilee. You've followed me. You've watched me sow the seeds of gospel there. Now I'm going to send you out 2 by 2. All right? So we're going to take the 240 villages of Galilee. That's about a 1-to-40 ratio. And you guys go here, you guys go here. And here's what I want you to do." He very clearly spelled out what he wanted them to do. He was training them as leaders at that point. When they came back, what did he do? He debriefed it with them. And then about 9 months later, sent 72. And so Jesus was building out, he was doing leadership development. And because he told them, he said, "Pray to the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth workers." What he's saying is, guys, pray that when you go into those villages, that the seed of the gospel that I planted and people who accepted Christ back then, when I first spread the gospel, pray that God will grab a hold of somebody's heart to be the leader in that village. And that's what he was praying for. And so we want to help people understand that this is not an anti-biblical leadership development is discipleship. So here's a simple way to do leadership development. It's discipleship. So I was leading a small group. This is when I was a church planter. It's 25 years ago, whatever it was.
Nobody's counting,
Yeah, who's counting? Yeah. So this guy comes up to me. His name's Roger. He comes up to me after a small group, and he looks at me very enthusiastically. He said, "Mac, I want to do what you do." I said, "What are you talking about? You want to do what I do?" He said, "I want to lead a small group the way you lead a small group. The questions you ask, the community that you've built, and you challenge us to go live and we grow, and I want to do what you do." Now, the whole time, Matt, he's telling me that, I'm standing there smiling at him, and I'm thinking, you can't do what I do. You're not ready. But he was so persistent, he wouldn't give up. And so this is one of the things I teach pastors and staff. We got to look for willingness, not just readiness. Because when you only look for willingness, you're doing leadership placement, not leadership development. And the church has defaulted to leadership placement, not leadership development. Leadership development takes time. So I looked at this guy. I said, "Okay, Roger, you come to my house 15. I didn't want to do it. But I was like, "Okay, you come 15 minutes early and plan on staying 15 minutes late next Friday night." He shows up 15 minutes early. I look at him. I say, "Okay, Roger, one of the most important things you can learn about leading a small group is build biblical hospitality. So a culture of biblical hospitality. So here's how you do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I named 4 or 5 things, how you do it." I said, "Now let's go downstairs. You watch me do it." So went downstairs, went through small group, came upstairs afterwards. I said, "Roger, what'd you see me do right? What could I have done better? What did you learn?" And we talked it through. Next week, he shows up 15 minutes early. "Roger, one of the most important things you can learn is how to ask an icebreaker question." Watch me do it. Yeah, I told him how to do it, and he watched me do it. Then the next week, I let him do it. I gave him feedback afterwards, We did this for 6 months. And next thing you know, I'm looking at Roger going, he's ready. And so I told the group, and over 50% of the group went with him and started a new group. So it doesn't have to be hard. It's relational discipleship.
Well, and I think one of the things there within that I think can get missed so easy because you see the same thing that I see. We do our last round of survey. We're looking at feedback from over 1,000 church leaders, and they tell us top 1 or 2 every time. The biggest challenge I have is having enough of the right kind of leaders around me. Yeah. So leadership development is critical, and so they're even dealing with an issue of willingness. And where are those people? When you run into that, because I have no doubt that you hear that too. Where do you help that pastor who's like, I don't have anybody around me. Like, I don't have anybody willing to be that guy to, lead a small group or to help out in any other way?
Yeah. What we want to do is first we got to have the I see and you conversation with people. We got to look at them. And what I tell pastors is when you look at people in your church, you got to look at them, not for what they are today, but for what they could be 12 months from now. Think about when Jesus recruited Matthew in Matthew 9. What was he doing? He was collecting taxes. Was he ready? No, but he was willing. And so Jesus, I'm sure had an I see in you conversation with him. Hey, here's what I see in you. I want you to just come follow me. I'm not inviting you to be a leader, but I am inviting you to take a task of leadership. So you give them task before you give them title. So I was giving Roger tasks along the way. Right. Now, a lot of times, what I was doing is I identified, and this is what we have to do. We have to identify specific competencies we want them to learn. So with Roger, how to facilitate discussion, how to build biblical community, how to deal with difficult people, whatever the competencies are for that role, you identify the essential ones. You tell them what those are and say, I'm going to train you in those. Okay. Now it's what I call the triad of development. I'm going to give you the knowledge. I'm going to give you assignments, which are the experience. So knowledge, experience, and then coaching. So Roger, here's what you need to know about facilitating discussion. I want you to facilitate discussion. I'm going to give you feedback. You just do that again and again and again. And then here's what happens. We're growing their competence. We're growing their character. But here's the thing we also have to recognize. Leadership development is not just about growing someone's competence and character. It's about growing their confidence. And I've discovered the higher the confidence I have in the individual, the higher the confidence they have in themselves. So after a while, somebody who's scared, because we got to recognize what's holding them back is fear. Thank God that pastor of mine when I was 27 looked past my fear and said, I see what Mac could be if I invested in him. And so that's what we got to do.
Yeah, and I think two things there that I'm thinking of with that conversation when somebody says, hey, I don't see anybody who's willing. Sometimes I wonder in that situation if the people in their church look at the relationship and go, he's far more concerned about what he can get out of me than what he'll be able to invest in me. And so I think it's something that we have to check, because I think as pastors and church leaders, we know that we need help.
Yeah.
But people, if they're going to jump in, not only want to be helpful, but I do think at some point in time, if it isn't beneficial and advantageous for them, there's a shelf life to that if they even get started. And so how do we demonstrate the fact that, whether it's I see this in you, and that's the first time somebody's seen something, taking time to not just speak in terms of broad platitudes, but, when you go, that thing that you see right there, I don't know if you understand how significant and helpful that is, and how many people you're going to be able to impact and encourage because of that. They've taken it for granted because they just think that doesn't everybody do that? No. That's this particular brand of genius that God's given you. The other thing I like about what you were saying, I think people are so stretched for time that when most people think discipling a leader, they're like, well, we're going to have to add something else to them, another class, additional reading and training, and those things might be helpful, but all you're simply doing, what I'm hearing you say is, the Holy Spirit's already working, and I'm just kind of coming alongside in this one particular aspect of their life. If the Holy Spirit's the one leading them and helping them follow Jesus, I'm just joining the Holy Spirit in that work in this small place in their life. And so even though it isn't about, new spiritual content, it's still discipleship.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we can easily lose because we just think we're going to have to stack more on people, and who has time for that?
Oh, you're exactly right. And here's one of the biggest paradigm shifts I think that has to happen in the mindset of churches. When we talk about leadership development in the church, you know what we're doing? We're talking about, hey, come follow me. I'm going to teach you to turn our ministry widget so my ministry machine can keep running. And we've got to make the paradigm shift. Leadership development, or the discipling of leaders in the church, needs to be about helping people live a biblical lifestyle of leadership. So now I look at a guy in my church, I have the I see in you conversation. I said, hey, I want you to come follow me. I'm going to teach you to be a small group leader. But listen, as we talk about facilitating discussion, I'm going to teach you how to do that. It's going to change your marriage. It's going to change the way you lead at work. So I'm going to give you, 5 keys to facilitating great discussion to get everybody involved. I want you practicing that at work. I want you practicing that at home. I want you practicing that with your kids. It's literally going to, it's funny. I teach a little deal. It's called 5 follow-up questions. It's 5 hats you can put on, 5 different follow-up questions. And I teach that in this training I do. And guys come to me all the time and say, that changed my marriage. And so we got to teach people to live a biblical lifestyle of leadership. People don't show up to our church-based training because it doesn't add value to them.
Yeah.
And people value what adds value to them.
Yeah.
I'm as busy as anybody, but I tell you what, if somebody that I respected came to me right now and said, Mac, I see this in you and I want to invest in you and I'm going to raise your leadership level that's going to impact your life as a whole, you better believe I'm going to find time for that, as busy as I am. And I think they will too. Yeah.
And I think the opportunity, if somebody's listening to this going, okay, I feel like we're talking about a gear that I'm missing. What we're really talking about here is the cultivation of empathy, which is something we've been talking about in recent episodes, which is at some point it's you being able to see the world through somebody else's perspective and being able to see the world through the perspective of people who are in your church. And it might be that they need to, from their perspective, they're just looking for a place to make a difference, or they're looking to join you in what you're doing. Like they love why your church exists. but nobody's been able to connect the dots and say, hey, you can actually play a part in that. It isn't just people who are on a platform or people who, have a title in front of their name and get paid by the church, but you can make that impact. And so it's being able to know at least some of your people well enough to be able to go, when I'm going to present this opportunity in front of them, I know enough about them to know this is what's going to be most meaningful to them as an opportunity to be able to be part of what we're doing, because we are inviting them into what we're doing, but it's got to be a win for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. And I love, inviting them into what you're doing. Jesus said, come follow me. When Jesus said, come follow me, he was making a time commitment to those guys. And he didn't say, come follow me or come to my class, come to my discipleship class, or come to my workshop. He didn't say that. He said, come follow my life. And for any staff member that says, you know what, Mac, I hear what you're saying, but I am way too busy to do leadership. You're adding one more thing to my plate. Okay. Here's what I say. That excuse of I'm too busy to develop leaders is one of the most humorous, because if I'm saying I'm too busy, that means I got this long list of things that I can look at. I can give some of those away.
Right.
If I'm so busy, that means I'm doing so much leadership that I can look at somebody and say, you know what, I'm really busy. Come follow me. I may not have time to interact with you a lot, but come with me and watch me. On the drive back, we'll debrief what you learned. And it's 3 questions. What did you see? What did you see me do well? What could I have done better? Be honest with yourself about that. And then what did you learn from the experience? So, hey, hop in the car, come watch me lead this, and then let's talk about it afterwards. Hey, come to our staff meeting. And just sit over there, watch our staff meeting. We'll go do a 15-minute coffee afterwards. Ask those 3 questions. Matt, I never stepped foot in a staff meeting until I was on staff. I never stepped foot in an executive team meeting until I was on an executive team. That's not right. And so we got to begin to invite people into our life. Come follow me. Come follow me.
Yeah.
And watch me. Let's debrief what you learned.
Yeah, I think whether it's it's easier for me to get tasks done myself, or knowing that it's going to mess with your rhythms, in terms of you may have to not just go do something that you'd go do on your own. It'd be faster if it was just you, but somebody else is riding along with you, going and doing a hospital visit, or going and, thinking about preparation of a talk or debriefing a talk. You could probably do that real quickly on your own, but bringing somebody else in, it's going to challenge your time and things like that. But if you don't take those opportunities, one, you're absolutely creating a lid within your church in terms of the leadership capacity of your church. But and not only are you not including other people in this, like, you're not going to get better either. I mean, I know those places where I've got people with me. When I think about my preaching team and what we've had here, is one of the reasons why I feel like I continue to grow as a preacher is because I've got other people speaking into this. And so I think that's another missed opportunity. It's really short-sighted to go, I don't have time to do leadership development, or quite honestly, I don't really want to do it. You're disadvantaging everybody, the church, other people, and yourself. But here's one other objection that I think that I'll hear sometimes, and we can coach them up on this, is that, like, where do I go in terms of getting content, and how do so I just heard Mac rattle off 25 different things, and I could go back and try to rewind this podcast, but I'm not going to. So where do I go to get content? So I want to talk a little bit about your YouTube channel that you've started for leadership development. Talk about the genesis of the idea, kind of what you're hoping to accomplish, just putting out videos, just all the content out there. I've just been enjoying it so much. So talk a little bit about the channel, what you're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I started the channel for a very specific reason. One is I've been training churches in the leadership pipeline process for a few years now, and I get a lot of questions, and you know how it is. You get the same thing. It's the same questions over and over again, and you're just not always accessible. And so I thought, hey, I want to go on YouTube, make some YouTube videos, and the channel is specifically geared towards helping you become a better leadership developer. And so I got on YouTube and I started searching leadership development, and everything on there that I could find on leadership development is about developing you as a leader, but not developing you as a developer. And it's not until at our level, because Ephesians 4:11 and 12, he's given apostles, pastors, the APAS, he's given those to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. When I studied that years ago, I was like, oh my gosh, those 5 roles, those were lay leaders in the church. not professional clergy. And so my paraphrase of that verse is, he's given leaders to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So until I begin to understand, my role is not just to develop leaders. My role is to develop developers. And so I started searching on YouTube. I couldn't find anything, nobody teaching you how to become a leadership developer. So I thought, okay, every Tuesday I'm going to start releasing content on how to develop leaders. And so that's why I did it. And then each video comes with a description that has 3 or 4 questions, so that you can get your staff together and use it as a little huddle, a little learning huddle from that.
Yeah, it's been fun to see. You posted some pictures that people have sent you on social media about, how they're using that with staff teams and things like that. So guys, let me kind of smarten you up here a little bit in terms of the way in which this works. So when you think about who you are as a leader, and we talk about here on 5 Factors, the idea that we want to help you build a great church. And that's why we connect with a lot of people. They're trying to figure out how to grow their church, how to disciple people, how to develop leaders, all that type of stuff. And we say, look, you're not going to be able to lead a healthy church if you're not healthy yourself. And so we start talking about stuff like relational health and physical health, spiritual health, all those type of things. But what Mac's saying is that those 2 things, as good as they are, there's still another opportunity for you if you want to take it. And that is to not just develop yourself as a leader or even think about developing other leaders, but to develop other developers. And I think that's the opportunity. I think Mac's right. Again, having been doing this for a while, not as long as you, but having done this for a while, I would agree. There's not a lot out there in terms of helping somebody go, how do I develop the developers? And so the content's great. If somebody was hearing this, and this is the first time they're interacting with you, and they're like, that's great. And we'll link up the YouTube channel in the show notes, but where's a good place for them to start on your channel to be able to just go, okay, this is a good starting place?
Yeah, go to the channel, youtube.com/MacLake, MacLake, and go to the playlist. And there's a playlist called Eliminating Excuses. And I think there's 4 videos in there. I think that would be a good place to start, because most people aren't starting because they've got some roadblock that's an excuse. And there's 4 videos in there that deal with specific excuses. Nobody's ready. We don't have the money. I'm too afraid to try. That sort of thing. So I think that would be a good place to start. And then Matt, can I give everybody a tip? This is what I call a cheat system. Okay. Yep. You mentioned earlier, you said, hey, what do you do? Where do you get content to develop other people? Okay. We're surrounded in it. We're surrounded by it. Okay. It's so funny. You said it earlier. That in the United States, the church's number one problem that we hear is leadership development. Yet you look, and we are surrounded by leadership content. Yep. So what it tells me is content is not the solution to America's leadership problem. Process is. So I'm going to give you, don't even have to, the triad of development I shared earlier, sort of underneath this, but here's the big takeaway that somebody can walk away with today and start developing leaders. Okay. Let's say that you got a leader you want to develop in how to delegate. Okay. You go to Craig Rochelle's podcast, you find one he did on delegation. Okay. You copy that link, put it in a Word document, title it Delegation, put the link right there. And you're going to do this. You're going to send it to the 2-3 people you're developing. You're going to say, watch this video, and you're going to put these questions underneath the video. What stood out to you the most? What challenged you the most? What questions did it raise? What leadership strength in you did it affirm? What growth area did it reveal? What scripture passage illustrates or teaches what Craig taught in this video? How can you put what you learned into practice before we get together and talk about it? And what are 3 to 5 action steps that you need to take over the next 30 days?
Yeah.
And then one more, what accountability question do you want me to ask you later on?
Yeah.
You put those questions with any chapter of a book, video, article, blog post that teaches how to do a skill. Put those questions with it. You got a leadership development module right there.
Two things there, y'all, if you're listening. Number one, We just hacked the system. Number two,
Yeah,
I
you
don't
sure
want you
did.
to wreck your car trying to write all this down. So if you go to the show notes or you go to fivefactors.net/process, we'll give that to you. We'll create the template and you can just get it and you'll have it. And so the questions are there. We'll show you exactly where to add the link and you can just kind of wash, rinse, repeat and do that time and time and time again. This is the way in which we continue to make progress. We find small, simple, sustainable ways to be able to get where we want to go. So Mac and I are on the same page on this, is that the best way for you to grow personally and to help other people grow is through systems, because it allows you to simplify what matters most, and it allows you to scale this out so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time. And some of y'all are so tired and so exhausted because you're constantly trying to reinvent what you're doing. And it's like, just find something that works and keep doing it. And it may not have 10x results overnight, but again, where are you going to be in a year, 5 years, a decade of doing the same thing? That's some of the things that I respect most about leaders, are the guys that are just like, I know my system, it gets results, and we're going to get a lot farther by doing this one thing than by trying to change it up all the time.
Yeah, Matt, you take that little system I just gave you, you put it with a piece of content. You take 2 or 3 people through it, take 2 or 3 more people through it, take 2 or 3 more people through it. Then you tell them, hey, I want you to start taking some people through it. Now that becomes reproducible. And when leadership development becomes reproducible, it becomes unstoppable.
Yeah.
Because your folks are just going to keep taking it and using it and using it and developing other leaders.
Yeah, and here's the difference between management and leadership. Management basically just kind of puts it out there and says, hey, this is available. Leadership says, hey, do this. And if you just keep doing that, even if they don't respond the first time, but you keep, like, this is you basically going, this is the way forward, and who's coming with me. And even if not everybody comes with you the first time, maybe only one person does, maybe next time 2 people do. And that's just, again, the way forward on that. So that's just immensely helpful process there. I want to talk about
the other key is start small too. Start small.
Yeah.
Don't take 2 to 3 people. Start small.
Yeah, probably the worst thing that we can do is if we have a position at kind of overseeing an organization or even a team, is coming down from the mountain and basically just kind of rolling this out. It's dumb for a couple of reasons. One is it's going to be startling to a lot of people, and they're not going to resonate with where you're coming from. Secondly is you don't know if it works yet. Like, you don't know if it works for this group of people. So you might as well grab a couple people, beta test it, see how it goes, make the corrections that you need to make. And this is true for anything, certainly within leadership development, is take the basics, work the basics, and then be able to build and grow from there over time. Yeah. One of the things we talk about, Mac, within the 5 factors is physical health. And, we were talking earlier kind of about this change that you had to make kind of when you reached 40, about just kind of taking more of a focus on physical health. I'd just love to hear a little bit about that story and kind of what the outcomes have been since then.
Yeah. I was 40 years old. I had planted a church. I was several years into the church plant. Of course, that's stressful, time consuming. And it was one Sunday morning. I was standing on the front row during the service, and there was a PowerPoint slide on the screen. And I turned to my wife and I looked at her and I said, "Who's the guy on the screen?" She said, "That's you." I said, "That is not me." And I was way overweight, and I knew that I was coming home from work every day. And I was laying on the couch and I was too tired to play with my kids. I was literally laying on the couch, throw a ball and say, "Hey, let's go get the ball and bring it back to daddy." And I had no energy. I was overweight. Matt, I was living the typical Western diet, but I didn't know it was bad. I was drinking Mountain Dew and eating fried chicken. I didn't know all that was bad, and eating ice cream every night and cereal. And so a buddy of mine introduced me to Body for Life. And I started doing Body for Life by Bill Phillips. This was years ago. That was a long time ago, and saw a physical transformation and saw an energy transformation. And a year later, and I said, I'm not going to preach on this until I've lived it. So 1 year later, I did a sermon series on health. I forgot the title of it, but 4-week series on health. It's been a passion ever since, and a discipline ever since then. And my wife had her aha moment when she went on a cruise with her grandma, and she came off the cruise. I remember picking them up, and I pulled into the cruise port to pick her up, and she came running and jumped in my arms crying. I was like, what in the world? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's going
That's
on?
not how a cruise is supposed to turn out.
No, no, no. And she looked at me. She said, Mac, everybody on that cruise was old. She said there were two groups. There were groups that were walking around, living life and loving it. There were groups that were sitting in wheelchairs and barely able to get around. And she looked at me and she said, Mac, I want us to have a goal. I want us to die young at an old age. And that stuck. And so that's our goal, is we try to live with optimal energy. We want to die young at an old age. My health verse is from Deuteronomy 34. Moses was 120 years old, yet when he died, yet his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. And I just think, Matt, what if pastors would begin? It breaks my heart when we make jokes about eating processed food and it literally just breaks my heart. Dr. Hendricks used to tell us, he would say, gentlemen, do you want me to tell you how to add 15 years to your ministry? And we go, yes, sir. And I was ready to write the answer. And he said, eat right and exercise every day.
Yeah.
I was 30 at the time. Forget that, man. That's not very well. And now I've learned if I want to optimize my calling that God has on my life and my family, then I need to optimize my energy by moving the way God created our bodies to move, eat what God created for us to eat, and sleep the patterns in which God designed the systems for us to sleep. And when you put those three things together, you can optimize your health.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you now? Like how much are you sleeping at night?
Yeah. So I go to bed around 9:00, and and so what I do, one of the best books I read, this was 2 years ago, it's called Sleep Smarter by Sean Stevenson.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious.
So good.
Brilliant. 21 strategies for sleeping smarter. Please don't take sleeping pills. Read this book.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I go to bed at 9:00, turn the lights out, make the room as dark as I can. I've been off of blue screens, for at least an hour, because that after the sun goes down, when you're in front of a blue screen, it signals your body not to produce melatonin, because it's saying to your eyes are receiving that, and it's going, oh, don't produce melatonin to put you to sleep. And so you might fall asleep because you're tired, but you won't sleep well. You're getting what Sean Stevenson calls junk food sleep, not healthy sleep.
Yep.
So I go to sleep around 9, and I do not set an alarm clock unless I have an early morning meeting, because I want my body to wake up it goes through the REM cycles. I want my body to wake up when I've completed a REM cycle, not when an alarm goes off.
Yeah, the smile, if you're on the YouTube channel seeing me smile, that's kind of not a smile. It's, Mac is a granddad. He doesn't have kids at home that you got to get up and take to school. I will say one thing, though, that's been helpful for me is knowing that a typical REM cycle is about an hour and a half, right?
Yes.
Is knowing that I'm going 6 or 9.5. It's like 6, 7.5, 9, it's somewhere around in there. And so knowing that that's in general how it's going to go for me is in terms of adjusting that. So if I can't get 7.5, which is what I tend to do, then I'm at least going to try to get 6. I'm not going to try to get in the middle of that.
And if you have kids, what you do is when you lay down to go to sleep, it's going to take you 10, 15 minutes typically to fall asleep. Set your alarm. If I'm going to bed at 9:30, I'm going to calculate the REM cycles and say, okay, hopefully, well, if you got a little one, they're going to wake you up in the middle of the night. But calculate your REM cycles and set your alarm based on that, and that might help a little bit.
Yeah. In terms of eating, what are some of the adjustments that you're having to make, even maybe in the last year?
Yeah, I eat really clean. But over the
is that like
year,
24/7, 365? Are there cheat meals, cheat days in there, or how do you do that?
No cheat meals.
Okay.
From what I've studied about sugar,
it's poison.
It's poison. Milk, grains. I'm just like, what? If my vision is to die young at an old age, I have to make food choices and health choices today based on that vision, and rather than the desire of the moment.
Yeah.
And so I eat really clean. The adjustments I made past year is Cindy and I started buying bone broth protein. so that we could get more bone broth into our system to help with all kinds of
30 seconds benefits of bone broth.
Yeah, it's going to help with your bone density. It's going to help with your microbiome. It's a good form of protein, and so there's an advantage of that. I read a book 2 years ago called The Microbiome Solution. So Hippocrates, over 2,000 years ago, said that all sickness begins in the gut. Mm-hmm. And he says, let food be your medicine and medicine be your food. And that wisdom they are discovering has proven to be true, even though it's 2,000 years old, that you can heal yourself with food. And if you eat right, Matt, you look at our Western culture, it's frightening. We have highest levels of obesity. We have highest levels of Alzheimer's, highest levels of ADHD, all these different diseases that we have. And you look at other countries that don't have it. Well, what's the common factor? It's the Western diet.
Yeah.
And so we've got to, the other thing, I've been fermented foods much more over the past year, because what that does, it puts healthy bacteria in your gut.
Yeah.
And if your gut's healthy, you're going to be healthier. But if you're slamming sugar and Coke and artificial flavorings, you are putting stuff in your gut that's actually may not produce disease right now, but it is producing disease over time. And here's the thing that frightens me, and that if I could talk to pastors, I wish they would see this, is in the United States, our lifespan is longer because of medicine, right? But our health span is shorter because of our disciplines.
Yeah. And
my mom is 84 years old, healthy as could be, except she's got Alzheimer's. She's had Alzheimer's for 10 years. I can go visit her today. We can go for a walk and we can have a great time. But she won't remember that I was there tomorrow. She won't remember I was there an hour later.
Right.
So my mom's health span, she will probably live to be 90. But her lifespan, she'll probably live to be 90. Her health span ended 10 years ago.
Yeah. There's a lot of research out there even trying to see connections with Alzheimer's and things like that. So guys, what I hope you're hearing when it comes to food, I mean, now one, again, the Standard America Diet, that's an acronym, and it spells out what that acronym is for a reason. It really is sad in terms of what that's done to us. And so we'll link up a couple things in the show notes that can just help you, again, maybe just get some awareness on that. Maybe you're not even ready to take some action on that, but you want to maybe you smarten up a little bit and just kind of see what else is out there. Because you hear us talking about stuff, like bone broth. Like, what are y'all talking about? Great. We'll smarten you up a little bit and helping you out there. What about exercise? What does that look like? At this point, getting older, testosterone levels change, evolve, things like that. What does exercise look like for you at this point?
Yeah, I keep it pretty simple. I had a young church planter say, "Hey, I want to follow you around." And he flew to Miami with me, and he said, "I want to work out with you." And he was so excited thinking I was going to do all this crazy stuff. And I just go in and push and pull. Yep. And then I do HIIT training, 3 times a week. So if I had to make it simple, if there's a pastor out there who's going, okay, this is overwhelming to me, where do I start? I mean, here's what I would say. Number one, begin to eliminate processed foods. Eat that which God made. Okay, don't worry about keto diet, paleo diet, all that. Don't worry about it. If God made it, eat it. Okay. And don't worry about fat grams and all that. Just if God made it, eat it. And if it's a cow or chicken or meat, make sure it is organic, grass-fed, not hormone injected. Okay. Because you are not, many people say you are what you eat. Well, that's not quite true. You are what you ate.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So I would say just, start to decrease the processed foods. And then number two, if you want to read a book, get the 1 minute workout. 1 minute workout. I can't remember the author's name.
I can't either. We both read it.
Yeah. If you just do 3 12-minute high intensity interval exercise, that's, what is that? 3 times 12 is 20. 36 minutes a week. It is much better for you than even 5 rounds of 50 minutes of cardio.
Yep.
And so, I would say just start simple, 36 minutes of exercise, high intensity interval training. Google that and see what it is and go do it for 12 minutes.
Yeah, I think the other principle here is there's plenty of information out there, right? And so build yourself into it. There's a lot of people investing a ton of money in a lot of things, whether that is their own personal development as a leader or their own development as a human being when it comes to things like physical health. And start small, start simple. If that's anything, like if you feel like we're just all over the map talking a bunch of details, cut through the system and hack to the basics. And I think what both Mac and I have experienced personally, and what we're trying to help other people with, is keep it simple. So that's going to give you the best opportunity to keep it sustainable. And that's what we want to do, because we're not just in this for, a half minute. We're in this for a lifetime.
It's got to be a lifestyle. It's got to be a lifestyle that you enjoy. Maybe high intensity interval, maybe you love basketball. Well, go down and run hard, full court for 1 minute, and then just shoot for 1 minute, and then run hard for 1 minute up and down the court, and then shoot for another minute. It's got to fit your lifestyle and what you enjoy.
Absolutely. And that's going to be different for different people. All right. So you get to the last day of your life, and it's the last day. And but at the end of the day, they're going to basically delete everything you've ever said, ever written. You got 280 characters. You got one tweet to basically be your legacy. What goes into that tweet? What are you trying to communicate with the world?
Oh, he was a man who loved his family passionately, and he multiplied multipliers. That'd be it.
That's a good one. And if you have been following him on social media, and if you haven't, you should be, you'd see that those two things are true. And even the move back to being around family, being around kids and grandkids and things like that, that's obvious. And certainly with all the work that you're doing, you're impacting a lot of us in churches, and I'm really, really grateful for that. And I think the thing that I want to just acknowledge you for is just the intensity of your consistency, that it's that you're coming back and you're not teaching just 90 gazillion different things. You're coming in and helping churches and leaders and organizations think about how you continue to develop developers. And that's going to pay off in ways that I think you're probably seeing, and in ways that you're not going to. So I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks so much for the time. Well, thanks again to Mac Lake for a really helpful conversation. Would really encourage you to follow him on Twitter at MacLake, MACLAKE, and really want to encourage you to subscribe to his YouTube channel. We'll link this up in the show notes, or you can go to youtube.com/Mac Lake, and he's producing videos every single week that are unbelievably helpful. I've used them. I'm using them with our team here in Athens, Georgia. Would really encourage you to do that. Here's the biggest takeaway for me, that if you want to develop leaders, you have to see them first as disciples of Jesus Christ. And so for those of us within the church, that this is an absolutely fundamental foundational principle that we need to build everything off of, that every single point of leadership development within a church is part of the overarching umbrella of discipleship. So you could disciple people in a lot of ways. One of those ways is leadership development. So don't forget, as you're trying to develop leaders, don't just care about things like their skills. See everything that you're developing in this big umbrella of helping them become fully formed followers of Jesus. All right. So again, if you are new to the 5 Factors framework, would encourage you to go to our overview, go to 5factors.net/overview, learn a little bit more about the framework and why we think it's so critical for you as a leader to focus and invest in your personal health. Mentally, physically, relationally, spiritually, vocationally. All of those things are vital if you're going to find the endurance that you need to thrive as a leader for the long haul. So go ahead over there now. You can get that in the show notes as well. Just click on that link. You'll download a free PDF that'll give you an overview of our framework. Also give you a very easy way to take a quick 5 to 10 minute assessment to see how healthy you are right now and to find the areas of personal health that you need to develop in. All right. So you're going to be able to focus on what matters most. You're going to find out how healthy you are by going to 5factors.net/overview. overview. All right. Again, would encourage you to follow me on Twitter as well at Matt Adair. Also, if you are not subscribed to the podcast, would really encourage you to do that. It's very simple. By doing that, then you don't have to go download a new conversation every week. It just shows up wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Would also, if you subscribed, would encourage you and invite you and would love for you to leave us a rating and review. That helps us know how helpful we are to you. Also helps to get this conversation out to more and more leaders like you as well. It's a very simple, easy way for you to not only help us, but to help a lot of other leaders around the world. And we really are grateful for the opportunity to serve you. We're grateful for these conversations that we're able to have. Looking forward to our conversation next week. And so for myself, for Tal Prince, for our guest this week, Mac Lake, thank you so much. Wherever you are, God bless you. Hope you have a great rest of the day, and see you next week on the next episode of the 5 Factors Podcast.